here to talk about a couple things, and we wanted to do things a little bit differently today. And we wanted to share a story with you about some research we did with Google. And part of that, after we get through this research, we're going to have three amazing panelists come up to tell these transformational stories on their journey with G Suite. So that includes Mailchimp. You're going to hear about them from Jamie as a technology leader, Door, who's disrupting the real estate market, one of the newest companies out there, and Ariell, if you're not familiar with RHR, they do consulting and coaching for the Fortune 50 all the way down to the biggest investors in the world. So with that, I want to set this context of what we learned just for a couple minutes. So we did this survey with Google, and we basically also surveyed our 12,000 customers. And if you don't know us, we've been actually working with Google since 2014, and we're focused on CRM and automating a variety of stuff. But the real thing we learned across this survey is every business needs to be a relationship business today. So probably not a surprise, right? All of you think about building relationships, but what does it mean? It means a shift from actually a transactional business to actually lasting relationships, but it also means how do we operate together? How do we collaborate together? How do we become more productive together? So, more evidence. You've seen this in the market. I'm sure you recognize a couple of these brands. I'm sure someone had a grande or venti latte this morning. But the real key is that these companies have set new trends on building lasting relationships. So that includes, obviously, Google. Some of us might have started with Google with just Gmail on a personal side, but now we're here all to think about the business side. Netflix. How many subscribers to Netflix out there? Okay, how many people are going to cancel their Netflix in the next 12 months? Okay, this is the reality of someone who builds lasting relationships. And I could go on with Amazon, whether it's Prime, actually some of the shopping stuff you do, but the real key is a lot of these patterns can be borrowed for all of us in each one of our industries. So, this was actually one of the most exciting things we learned. So we did this survey, and we thought we'd just get responses from salespeople about who's relationship makers. And what we learned is everyone in your business is a relationship maker today. So how many folks are in IT in the audience? Okay, a couple IT. How many are on the sales side or marketing side? Okay, so what's interesting is when you think about relationship makers, you really think about sales. This guy on a golf course, potentially, he's got a big Rolodex, throws it in his caddy or his Porsche, right? But the truth, the new world, is design's a relationship maker, your product team's a relationship maker, and how do they interact, how do they touch these different moments. But even IT, for all you folks in IT, the only way we can become relationship makers is by you enabling us. And that's something we're going to talk about here in just a bit. So this spreads across every industry. This wasn't, you're going to see actually in some of the booths out there, Google has a variety of industry stuff, but there's not one industry this doesn't affect. So whether it's healthcare, whether it's actually a B2B world, whether it's B2C, every one of your businesses is affected this way. And this new paradigm, and there's a lot of paradigms out there, is we're calling this the relationship era. And the key principles, we narrowed this down, and there's a big study about this that you can see what we did. It's about 30 pages, you can download it. But the real key is we all know that relationships are the foundation of our businesses, right? But we need to think differently with that. How does that affect how we adopt technology? Obviously, this big shift to lasting relationships. So how do we get reoccurring business versus these one-time transactions? And then the last piece is every moment matters. So all your touch points, all your technology touch points is going to determine if you're going to be a winner or a loser in the next phase. So here's some stats, just to kind of prime this conversation is, where do relationships happen? Okay, this shocked us, right? So this was this survey we did that's sponsored by Google. 93% of customer communication actually happens in Gmail. Okay, now we do some stuff capturing some of that Gmail, but we were shocked by this. I thought it would have been about like 60%, 50%, and the real key is this information is not being captured. So when you're thinking about technology, and we're going to talk a little bit about productivity, this is a really important factor, is how do you capture this specific information? Another shocker, let me get out of the way here, 61% of customers are now collaborating in Drive, Sheets, and Docs. So the communication that actually happens in email is already starting to happen in the productivity suite. So we'll get into that in a little bit. And of course, we're all unique snowflakes. Everyone wants personalized interactions. So I don't think that was a huge surprise there. So these are some of the new requirements we're seeing. So I know you IT folks, you have these huge RFPs. You think about technology differently, but let's just set the stage. A big factor is native integration with G Suite. And what that means to your end users is they want to actually work where they spend most of their time. If it happens to be a productivity suite, great. If it happens to be somewhere else, that's also okay. Does it drive collaboration, right? That's pretty normal. Easy to use. So easy to use to these users meant they don't want to be trained on their applications. They want you to be able to deploy it from anywhere. They want to be up and running in minutes. And that also affects IT here. So from up and running in minutes, There's no longer these huge, massive wall-to-wall deployments, all you can eat. These people were doing it in phases and in tranches, so something to consider for you. And we hear a lot about AI and ML. They want to automate all their existing busy work. So that's actually something that we spend some time on and some stuff we're actually going to release in the future. So the question worth thinking about, the analyst question is, Mark Andreessen wrote this article, Will Software Eat the World? And actually he was a futurist when he said this, but the real truth of it is, will the productivity suite eat enterprise software, and could it happen? And actually what we see is actually it's already starting to happen. So what do we mean by that? It means that people will actually work from Gmail, and 80% of the functionality from enterprise software will be there, and the other 20% will be a click away. So when you're visiting a lot of these technology booths, there's some super hot, innovative companies there. You need to think about that for your end users, because that's what they're demanding. So with that, I want to bring up our relationship makers. I want to kick off this panel. Just wanted to prime it. So meet Jamie. Actually, he's actually one of the people from Mailchimp. Mailchimp is actually a disruptor in technology in the email marketing space. Come on up, Jamie. There we go. Thank you. Meet Alex. Alex is one of the new disruptors in real estate from Door Homes. Really exciting company. He's going to come on up. And finally, meet Ariell, who we talked about with Ariell. Thanks for joining us. I want to talk about customer expectations. So we talk about this a lot, but what are you experiencing from a movement in your specific industry? What are you seeing in terms of whether we talk about the relationship era or other items?
Sure, yeah. So I think what's kind of interesting about Mailchimp is we have built our tool to kind of democratize cutting-edge marketing technology. So that's great because we put our priorities more so on making a great product instead of investing a lot of these resources into an expensive sales team. It's kind of become what it is because it's more of a self-service platform. So I guess I would say that generally we have kind of shifted things around to where everything is kind of this one-to-one relationship between a customer, or in my case, some of our partners, to an individual salesperson, and it's a much more kind of collaborative environment than it normally would be otherwise. And that's why I think that it's important for us to have tools like Copper, tools like G Suite to help kind of share this information across the whole team. Now basically we can not have to rely on any one person to keep all this information. There's no one key holder of information to our customers. It's a little bit more distributed and collaborated than it would be otherwise.
So to toss that down to Alex. So Alex, you're trying to disrupt this multi-billion-dollar real estate industry. And what's some of your thoughts when we think about lasting relationships, both from a people perspective, a technology perspective, and also how you're just growing your business?
So a handful of years ago, my mom sold her house, and I live in Dallas. We're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and she paid $50,000 to do so, 6%, which is standard in the U.S., and I just thought that was wrong. And so as I researched the space more, what became very clear is the way people now buy and sell homes, their expectations when they buy and sell homes are radically different, because 95% of people look online. That's Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, whatever it might be. And a majority of people now buy a house that they found on their own. So Door is a real estate transaction platform. We have employee agents. We charge a flat $5,000 to sell your house. We split the commission with you when you buy a home with us. And we're vertically integrated, so we've got a title company and a mortgage company as well as of a few months ago. And I think that the single biggest thing, and somewhat similar actually, that has changed in the real estate space is that information is now democratized. Agents are no longer gatekeepers to information, they're interpreters of information to some extent. And so 20 years ago, before Zillow provided access to that information, before Redfin provided access to that information, agents were gatekeepers. They were the ones who had literally printed binders of all the listings in the area. These days, everyone has access, almost the exact same access that realtors do to all that listing information. And so I think today the onus is on us to provide information as transparently as possible about both listings, but then also what's going on with your transaction when you're working with Door. And so that's obviously a lot of email communication, phone communication, text communication, bringing together a lot of disparate sources to provide information to you to make a good decision whether buying or selling a home.
So Ariell, so RHR has been in business since 1945. And what we thought a lot about when talking with them is also a generational divide. But one of the interesting things is like they have deep relationships on a service side. So tell us a little bit about RHR and tell us about your thoughts here.
Yeah, so we're a management consulting firm. We do a lot of work in the executive assessment space. We do a lot of work with boards, change management. And so we really want to make sure that when we're in with a client that it's personalized, that we have a very deep understanding of what they are like, what their competitors like, and what their industry is like. So we really need to understand the whole landscape in there.
Fantastic. So, relationship makers. So this is a really new concept. I think it's really driven by a lot of the collaboration platforms. We're all enabled a little bit differently, but how do you think about relationship makers, and also in regards to some of the tools you're adopting today?
Yeah. So I would say that everyone in the firm touches the client at some point, right? Whether it's accounting, the project coordinators, which I'm a part of, the consultants. So we need to have a system that really lets us be very visible and really talk about what we're doing with the client, right? So nothing gets left out. Excellent.
So what about yourself, Alex? Like, your business is all about relationships. And so, but how do you think about your people? How do you think about enabling for them to be relationship makers?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to think of the real estate industry as a non-recurring revenue business. But if you think of two types of recurring revenue, you have recurring subscription revenue, you also have recurring transactional revenue. The residential real estate industry actually has recurring transactional revenue. It's just one of the slowest recurrences in the world. It takes 7 or 9 years, and someone buys or sells another home, and they get another mortgage, and they get another title policy, et cetera. And so I think that the best marketing that we can do is provide someone a great experience when they buy or sell with Door, because then they tell their friends, and that's referrals for us and another relationship. But they also come back and work with us. And our operating theory from the beginning has been, if you work with Door, and this is a real number, our average clients save $10,500 by working with us. If you work with us, save that kind of money, you're never going to re-enter the traditional ecosystem ever again, I think. And so by providing a great experience and happening to save some money, we think that relationship becomes a recurring one throughout the person's buying and selling life cycle.
And before you go, Jay, how many of you out there are actually based on lasting relationships? That's the core of your business versus transactional. Okay. So how many of you actually think you need to shift to lasting relationships? Okay, interesting. So Jamie, you've been doing this for years at Mailchimp. I think you created an incredible brand. But talk to us also about that, and also how you're managing partners, how you think about it differently from a system perspective and a people perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I would say from the partners perspective, Mailchimp is interesting in that we don't have a lot of telephones in our office in general. I mean, we do almost 100% of our customer interactions online. Wow. And as far as the partnership side, we definitely have some telephone conversations. But surprisingly with that, we can still have a lot of kind of entry points into our ecosystem. A lot of partners can kind of come in from different places. A lot of customers can come in from different places. What's also interesting is the types of people that we serve at Mailchimp, the lines are sometimes blurry. So you had a slide earlier that kind of showed us everyone can be a relationship maker. And that's totally true at Mailchimp. So we have, for example, we have tech partners, folks that I might deal with that are also customers. We have customers who might be an agency partner. We have agency partners that could potentially be vendors or might have some kind of sponsorship relationship with them. And what that means is when these people kind of come into our ecosystem, they can come in from any corner of the business. So when that happens, this is why it's important for us to have tools like G Suite, like Copper, that can kind of help all of us stay on the same page. So one hand of the business knows what the other hand of the business is doing. And that's the tool, and that's kind of the method we use to make sure that everyone at Mailchimp can be a relationship maker.
Yeah, that's great. So we're here. How many of you folks are on G Suite today? And how many folks are migrating or thinking about migrating to the productivity suite? Okay, a couple of you. Well, it's an interesting journey. So, we share 12,000 customers with Google of all different sizes. And the journey is different, we hear about. And a lot of times they come on board when they're shifting to G Suite. A lot of times they've already come around. But the real key factor we've seen across the board is once a company has gone to this type of productivity suite, is they think about these technology requirements differently. And you saw me talk about just that topical level stuff, but how does Mailchimp think about technology after going to G Suite? That includes both from ease of use, adoption, deployment. What's some of the thoughts you guys have there?
Yeah, so I think we started using G Suite back in April of 2012, and that was before my time, but I think the people that made that decision were very forward thinking. They needed a product that would grow as we grew, and during that time we were growing rapidly. Now we have over 800 employees. We're based in 2 offices in Atlanta, an office out in Oakland, an office in Brooklyn. So definitely needs come from that. And when you evaluate technology, you've got to find things that are going to help you scale. So as a software as a service company, it was kind of a no-brainer for us to find a software as a service solution with collaboration being kind of at the cornerstone of the technology. So collaboration is a really big theme for us in selecting technology. Another thing, of course, is scalability. So those are the 2 things that we really look for when we're picking kind of these bigger enterprise applications that are going to kind of help serve us. Our company is still growing. We're spreading out further than before. So I would say that those are, if you break them down, there's a lot more detail to it, but those are the 2 main themes that we have to look for when we're trying to find technology that we're going to adopt. And typically when we do, it is much easier to adopt.
And are you guys still that agile enterprise is how you started? Still that startup mentality?
Yeah, I think so, a little bit. There definitely is a bit of a startup culture there. Again, now with just over 800 employees, we're starting to change a little bit. Sure. And we're getting more mature processes in place. But the good thing about it is a tool like G Suite, for example, those processes now, they're less opaque than they have been in the past. We can kind of collaborate and share on these things. And it helps us break down those information silos across teams. So everyone is kind of seeing the same thing instead of things kind of being locked out. Yeah.
Yeah. So Alex, on your side, thinking about, you built a company, and I think you started with G Suite, is that correct? Or
We did.
Okay. So talk to me about how you think about technology. Do you have an IT team? How do you think about deployment? You're continuing to scale.
Yeah, I was the IT team for the first year. I don't know. I remember back in, I think it was high school, and this is when Gmail first came out, and one of our friends had a Gmail invite link, and we were all like, oh wow, yeah, give me that. And so I've been using Gmail forever, as long as I can remember. And I think our employee base tends to be younger. You don't have many AOL or Yahoo email addresses on the resumes that we get. So there's no ramp-up time when it comes to teaching people how to use the software that we use for email. But then also, I think you tend to get SaaS'd to death after a little while. All of a sudden you look around, you're like, oh my God, we're using 30 SaaS products. And one of the big ones I remember recently was we were using Dropbox from the beginning and G Suite as well. And we realized suddenly, we're spending a bunch of money on Dropbox. We could just roll everything into G Suite. So reducing one SaaS product was helpful. And then also when we were looking at what was at the time ProsperWorks, now Copper, we loved just the native integration between those 2 and this idea of relationships. I mean, we've had some clients now transact with us multiple times, and you can see a running count of how many times you interact with that person. And I've seen some higher than 1,000, so 1,000 interactions across email, text, phone call. That's a lot of communication. And G Suite and the native integration with the CRM that we use reduce the ramp-up time for our clients, for our employees, and just made the whole thing a lot easier. It's one thing we don't have to think about, and we don't have an IT team.
Yeah. And so, Ariell, one of the interesting about RHR is how technology can, bridge the generational divide. Because RHR has been around for so long. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say that generally the consultants skew a little bit older, right? Because they all have PhDs, they've all been to a lot of school, and then other teams can be a lot younger. But since Gmail and G Suite has been around for a long time, people have used it in their personal life. So once we adopted the G Suite, people were coming over from their personal accounts to understand that, oh, this is how we're going to do work now. And then to answer the question more broadly, we aren't going to consider products that aren't using Google and aren't integrating Copper. We don't want to do manual data transfers. That's just a lot of work. So we want to make sure that they actively can work with those two systems. And then another thing, I think most people in this room have heard of GDPR. We want to know that it's secure, right? We don't want to have a vendor who doesn't know the legalities or is going to leave our data insecure.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we want to kind of open it up and kind of talk about a little bit of different things. We'll get a little bit wild here and free form. So talk us a little bit about like also people's expectations. So I think it's one thing to think about a company, but it's another thing, a lot of times things are deployed, people revolt, they do unsanctioned IT. That's how a lot of projects start.
Yeah.
But what's your experience with this? Like, what are the people's expectations specifically with technology? And then also, what advice can you give them on the journey? Because yours was a big transformational story.
Yeah. I would say it kind of depends on where people fall on that adoption curve, right? Some people who are early adopters are always going to be on the first train out. And then there's some people who kind of lag behind a little bit. So you just got to set those expectations and make sure that they're going to feel comfortable with where they're going. And for us, when we were implementing the change, we wanted to make sure that it was all about influence. So we got someone who's a very high visible senior staff member to commit to the change. This person kind of sent out a lot of emails, was very influential among their team and people that worked beneath him. And then we also had peer-to-peer mentoring and teachings, right? So it wasn't just the IT team teaching the business team, it was really users from the same team talking about it and learning that there's not just one way to do something.
That's great.
Again, the not having to think about IT has been great. We had 6 employees at the beginning of 2017, and we've got a little over 75 now. So it's been a lot of people to get up to speed, and not having to think about email is certainly nice. But I think the flip side of this is that just as information has been democratized in the real estate space, the expectations about getting information have also changed. One of the things that really struck me from the beginning, particularly with millennial clients, there's a lot of talk about, millennials don't buy houses. It's not true. They've been the biggest home buying population for the last 5 years running. Just it tends to be older millennials. But we millennials expect constant updates. And the thing that really surprised me was what we've come to lovingly refer to as the no update, which is when there's no news, but people want to hear that there's no news. So, hey, your house is on the market. It's been 5 days since you heard from me last, or whatever the amount of time might be. No news, everything's going well, talk soon, that sort of idea. So that no update is now a critically important thing, whereas my guess is, 50 years ago when it was just telephones, just landlines, that was not quite the expectation because communication was a lot harder than it is today.
Yeah, so Jamie, another question I wanted to ask you is about, you manage these unique relationship types, right? And you've kind of built your system that's more adaptive. You're managing the partner side, obviously there's other areas on the developer side. Talk to little people about that, both the adaptive system, who's your IT person for certain things, and how do you think about this next wave of technology for you guys?
Yeah, I can kind of give you an example of when we adopted formerly Prosperworks, now Copper.
You could say that.
Yeah, I think that that was interesting because we had an idea of what we wanted on our partnerships team. Yeah. And we're really lucky at Mailchimp because we have a great culture around change. The whole unfreezing and refreezing process is kind of part of who we are. So when we decided we wanted what we wanted, and that's usually the case with a lot of tools we adopt, we kind of go through all the typical hoops where you speak to your legal team, you speak to IT, and if it passes all the checks, typically you're going to bring it on. And usually you adopt it quite quickly. That was definitely true with G Suite, and it's absolutely true with Copper as well. I would say a lot of that culture comes from our business. I should say really it was our founder, Ben Chestnut. We have an internal model we use. And we say, listen hard, change fast. And basically what that means is the company is going to change in time. You have to pay attention. You have to make sure that you are innovative, you are useful, and you're having fun. And those are the things that keep our customers happy. So if our customers are happy, you're going to see the business change as well. That's us kind of changing a little bit around the needs of our product, and our product changes around the needs of our business. So as long as we are, I think, open about new technologies, we're picking the right things, that we have the ability to use. It kind of meets our requirements from the security perspective, the legal perspective. Adoption is much easier because it really is kind of ingrained in our culture.
So just to close it out here, on all your journeys, any final words of advice for those folks going for the transformation, those folks scaling? You want to take it away, Alex? Any final words of advice for the team?
Yeah, I think starting a company is kind of a simple thing, but difficult. And the simplicity of it, in my mind, we've been going now almost 3 years. 3 years in October, and the recurring theme in my mind is just do one thing towards the goal every single day, regardless of what you're trying to do. And that, I think, is true as if you're in a 100,000 person company or a one-person company. It's a really simple idea, but it's really hard to do, I think, in practice, because it's tiring, and sometimes doing one thing doesn't really seem to move the needle, but then you see this compounding effect over a long period of time. And I also think the easy thing to forget is that when you're in the early stage of a company, these small numbers are actually gigantic percentages. So going from 1 transaction to 5 transactions a few months later doesn't feel like that big a change, but it's a huge change percentage-wise. And so now when we're going from, say, 20 deals to 150 deals in a given month, it doesn't. It feels like more is happening because the absolute number is greater, even though in the long run percentage growth rates start to slow down. So I always remind myself, keep in mind the percentages, because they can often tell a very different story from the absolute numbers.
Okay. I would just say don't be afraid to change. Obviously with AI and a lot of stuff coming up, that's going to change how we do business. So we just need to keep our eye on that and learn how to incorporate that into our core business.
Fantastic. So with that, I've got a shameless plug. So check out Copper. Obviously, we've got a booth that's pretty exciting. You can see how we automate stuff. And I actually have something I'm supposed to do here. I'm supposed to give something away, and there's a magical card. And the drone winner this feels like the Oscars. So the drone winner here, and hopefully you're present, is Candy Embray. Where are you, Go Candy! Okay, all right. So everyone, just due to the fact that the keynotes ran long, we're going a little bit short to get you to your next session. We're thrilled to basically tell this initial story. This is just beginning of some of the research we're going to do. We encourage you to think about relationships differently. Think about how you manage that, the IT you're going to enable them with, and also how you build lasting relationships, both from a technology perspective, a people perspective, and obviously a business perspective. Thanks for joining us. It's been fantastic.